I'm Dan Maigler, and this is my open letter, the spoken word podcast by Anamika. Suicide is not failure. That is what I need to convince myself every day. Sometimes it's really hard. Today I'm going to take a risk. This letter is me unpacking my history and my feelings in a way I've never done before. I'm going to venture out past the cliches and platitudes. Vulnerability is the prerequisite to intimacy. Intimacy is being with someone with no armor on, no protection, raw authenticity. So here goes. I am a school social worker, therapist, podcast host, board member of Paws for Patrick, a nonprofit dedicated to bringing the love of animals to the people who need it the most, young people with mental health challenges. But long before I was any of that, I was a kid with struggles of my own. My immediate family was stable, but mental health challenges were part of the landscape of my mother's family. She had siblings with bipolar, schizophrenia, narcissism, the list goes on and on. By and large, it wasn't dramatic. It was like growing up next to an airport. Eventually, you stop noticing the takeoffs and landings until someone new comes into your world and says, "Doesn't that freak you out?" And you start to wonder if it should. After 6th grade, we moved across the country for my father's job, and I lost regular contact with all my friends and my 2 older brothers, who stayed in Chicago. My siblings adjusted and found friendships quickly, but I didn't. I got bullied and got quieter and more withdrawn, and eventually, unbidden, thoughts of ways I could kill myself popped more and more frequently into my mind. Fortunately, I stumbled into a church youth group. It provided me with a sense of meaning and purpose, and a community that made me feel like perhaps I was not the problem. To the contrary, I had value. From that experience, the core of my identity was formed. For me, the antidote to pain was service. Service to others made me feel good about myself and provided a conduit to connection. This was the ultimate win-win. What happens, however, when your service, your effort, your love, your friendship, in short, your best, is not enough? My senior year of college, my younger brother had a mental health crisis, and I realized my total powerlessness in the face of mental illness. He's since made a full recovery, and he might be the healthiest of my siblings today. For about a year, he was transformed, and I believe we'd lost him completely. I watched my parents try and fail to navigate the mental health system, and it was heartbreaking. Ultimately, we got lucky. That's it. We were not better or smarter or more well-equipped than 10,000 other families who lose someone they love. Professionally, I decided to dedicate my life to helping people. One of my first jobs out of college was working at home for abused and neglected teens. They told us that despite our best effort, over 70% of the kids we worked with would get pregnant and or go to jail before turning 18. I thank God every day for that experience. It helped me to realize that it wasn't all about me. I was a side character in the drama of these kids' lives. I could show up and care and give them my best, but most of the time, the shit they were dealing with was way bigger than what was in my power to heal. That didn't mean, however, that my care was worthless. Even it could never be enough to fill all the holes they were carrying. It provided me with a humility, which is the main thing that protects me from my self-loathing, when I fail to reduce the suffering that surrounds me. Flash forward a decade or so. A boy I've never met, but who was in my slice of the alphabet at the high school where I worked as a social worker, died by suicide the day before school started. I remember going to his house and meeting his parents. I remember his funeral and the next 8 years as I worked with his siblings. His picture looked down on me from above my desk. It remains there today. It reminds me that the kids I need to be most worried about are not the ones I know, but the ones who are struggling silently. That every day in every school, the kid who's in the most danger may look perfectly healthy. The next year, our school experienced a suicide cluster. In January, a freshman boy laid down on the train tracks, then a sophomore boy in February. In March, one of my students and I were talking about her best friend. Let's call him Oscar. He was a senior and left school to go to rehab for alcohol, but he dropped out of the program, and she was worried about him. I knew Oscar, and he did not like me. I had pressed his family to get him into therapy when he was younger, after he was caught drinking on a school trip, and he felt I was a nuisance. On spring break, we got the call that Oscar had also walked in front of a train. His friend blamed herself. She had saved his life before. Once he had called her drunk on a bridge, and she came and talked him down and brought him home. On the night he died, he called her, but she didn't charge her phone. Clearly, she failed him. If only she had charged her phone, Oscar would still be alive. I told her that wasn't fair. I told her unless she was going to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week monitoring Oscar, that she could not keep him safe. I told her that until she could show me that she could make a pencil levitate using only her mind and will, then I would not allow her to take responsibility for controlling anything outside of herself. What I said to her was true and right. But the hypocritical thoughts in my head didn't care. If I had been a better social worker, if I had formed a relationship with him, if I had truly gotten him the help he needed, perhaps. His picture joined the other boys to remind me that I need to never give up on connecting with a kid, because the prickliest customers who push us away the most might also be the ones most in need of our support. The years went by and I met a boy named Patrick. He had good days and bad days, but his bad days were really tough. I remember going to his house when he was refusing to come to school his freshman year. To hide from us, he swung himself out of his window up onto his roof. I think of his passive face as I chatted with him in the ambulance after the fire department got him down. I wondered if he was even hearing me. Was I doing any good? I brainstormed with his family, and over the months and years that followed, they tried everything we could think of, including sending him away to a wilderness program. He hated it. But he returned after several months, seemingly in control of his behaviors. He was compliant. Our connection grew, but still he held back. The pain of going to the wilderness meant he could not trust me, or any adult, until he was 18, and no one could send him away ever again. I tried to convince him that no one wanted to send him away. The only living being he would fully open up with was his dog, Cece. The first day of his senior year, he came to my office stricken. Cece had suddenly unexpectedly died. She was only 6 years old. How was he going to move forward? As the months went by, his family tried getting another dog, but it was too soon for Patrick. He was surviving, but he had things to share. I prayed that when he turned 18 in the spring, he would let out whatever he was holding on to. But then COVID came. He wasn't in school and he didn't respond to my emails. He was doing well at home, bonding with his family, even organizing a pet Olympics at his house. Then he had one of those bad days, a really bad day, and he died by suicide. This death hit me differently. I'd not known the other boys other than Oscar, and he never let me in, but Patrick and I worked together for years. My intellect tried to comfort me with the message that I had said to Oscar's friend, that I could not be responsible for anyone else's choices, but my heart refused to hear it. My guilt was compounded by the grace of Patrick's family and the way they embraced me. I felt I had failed them. I was supposed to be the expert to guide them, to support them in keeping their child safe, helping him to heal, and he didn't. Patrick did not die immediately. His brain was dead, but his body lived on. And his family allowed me to FaceTime with him, to tell him I loved him and say goodbye. Who gets that opportunity? I struggle even now to feel worthy of those moments, and I am so grateful. His family took their pain and made it an opportunity. They started Paws for Patrick to help young people with emotional health disabilities to connect with animals. Paws for Patrick has therapy dog handlers in the Chicago area that bring dogs to visit with kids. In all 50 states, they've helped connect young people to emotional support animals by paying fees for shelter adoptions and connecting help seekers to therapists who will write emotional support animal letters, so people can have their pets in no pet housing and don't have to pay pet deposit fees. Patrick died in May of 2020. Paws for Patrick started in August, and I've been on the board since the beginning. Every time I see Franzi, Steve, and Mags, Ben, Patrick's parents and siblings, a small part of me whispers, I will never be able to make up for my failure. I will never be worthy of your friendship and your grace. My work with Paws for Patrick is about educating people, primarily therapists, about the healing power of animals and encouraging them to write those emotional support letters for their clients when it's appropriate. I've written well over 100 of these for free, and each time it's a balm to my soul. This little thing that I could do to make the life of a family a tiny bit brighter gave me power to punch back against the suffering. So often as a therapist, we cannot see the benefit we bring to people as we're planting the seeds of healing and confidence that may not bear fruit for months, years, even decades. But when I tell a person I'm going to write them a letter so they can live with their furry friend, I bring them immediate relief. Whatever energy and time I give in service, I receive so much more in return. I needed that relief, that activity so much to heal from Patrick's death and the challenges that lay in store for me. On January 24th, 2022, I got a call from my mother as I was putting my sons to bed. My older brother had not heard from his youngest son in a couple of days, so he went by his apartment and found that he died by suicide. My sister and I went to the apartment to be with him as the police investigated and removed his son's body. Many of my nephews and nieces have been diagnosed with mental health challenges, but Brian was not one of them. He was friendly, funny, vibrant, full of life and charisma. Once again, the little voice of self-doubt and blame whispered to me that I should have seen this coming. I should have protected my nephew, my family, from this pain. Here I am, presenting myself as an expert on mental health and healing from loss, and the stark reality of my powerlessness against it was thrust into my face. Was this a punishment for my hubris? Once again, my intellect says no. It says that just as I would not take credit for my nephew's accomplishments, I cannot take responsibility for his unhealthy choices. But if I would not let my brother and sister-in-law take ownership of Brian's death, how dare I? Brian's life was not a failure. For 26 years, he brought joy to our world. His death is not a failure either. Something I have learned is that in the suicide loss community, the term suicide prevention can feel offensive. It implies that every suicide is preventable, and that can leave family and loved ones feeling blamed, as if they had acted differently, the person would still be alive. If we realize that mental health disorders are diseases like diabetes or cancer, we can reframe and accept that sometimes, even with perfect treatment and care, not everyone will survive them. While preventing suicide is a laudable hope, instead we should focus on promoting mental health. All of us are on a spectrum of mental health with good days and bad days. Promoting exercise is great for every person, not just those who have a diagnosis of heart disease. Similarly, promoting understanding of our feelings and treating them as tools rather than obstacles is a benefit to us all. Again, my intellect knows this, but it's hard to internalize, especially when it's personal. In late September of 2022, a recent graduate I was close with came to the school on his fall break from college to try to connect with me. He hadn't let me know he was coming, so I was unavailable when he stopped by, but he emailed me to say he would stop by again the next time he was in town. I was disappointed I didn't get to see him because I always enjoyed our deep conversations, but I didn't think much more of it until I got a call from my boss the next weekend that he died by suicide. Again, that flash of guilt, self-blame, and anger. The frustration that amazing people keep dying and that I'm helpless to stop it. In grief work, we use the term bargaining for the process of questioning ourselves and saying, if only I had done this or that, maybe things would have turned out differently. We blame ourselves subconsciously, hoping that if we can figure out how we screwed up, we'll never face this pain again. I know it doesn't work. I tell my clients all the time that they need to stop shoulding all over themselves in my office. Still, I let myself sit in my frustration, and I wish I could have talked to him and just subtly altered his course. His family's reaction was not like the roamers. I spoke at length to one of his brothers, but when I tried to get his parents' contact information from a friend of the family, it was implied that they did not want to hear from me. That rejection stung. I knew I'd done all I could for their son in the time I worked with him. And to be frank, I had no reason to suspect there was any chance he was suicidal. Those thoughts had not been present during his junior and senior years of high school. Still, were they right to be angry or disappointed with me? Again, intellectually, I knew I was not the problem, but I questioned. Maybe I was not enough of the solution. After Patrick died, I got a deep need to get a tattoo to memorialize him. I wanted to make sure that I thought of him every day. He was an artist and had spray painted an image of a paw print on a bridge near where he lived. It was a perfect symbol of Patrick and what he cared about. And I, as well as several of his friends and family members, ended up getting that image tattooed independently. When my nephew died, I felt the same need. He and my brother used to work on my brother's 1970 Chevelle together, so that one on my left forearm to partner with the paw print on my right arm. After this other young man, we'll call him August, died, I wanted something to remember him too. He was always such a deep thinker, and that version of Rodin's The Thinker felt like a perfect symbol for him, and went on my right bicep. When I look at my tattoos, I do not feel shame or guilt, I feel gratitude. These young men have welcomed me into their world and shared their lives with me. My time with them enriched me, and I'm better for having known them. Before I experienced my first suicide loss, I used to say that if I ever lost a client that I truly cared about to suicide, I didn't know if I could keep doing this work. I'm not detached from my clients. I love each one of them. While I know there are therapists who keep a quote-unquote professional distance, and that can be effective in helping clients form their own insight with less risk of developing dependence on the clinician, I can only show up as my authentic self. I'm the same person in my office as I am with my friends and family. If I don't truly and fully invest in my clients, I think they could feel it. Regardless, it's the only way I know how to be. So in less than 10 hours after I watched police wheel my nephew's body out of his apartment, I had to do a suicide risk evaluation at work. I was relieved that I could still do it professionally. I thought my feelings regarding my nephew influenced my judgment about the client who was in front of me. I remember a seminar where a psychiatrist said, if you're doing the hard work, the work that really matters, you'll eventually lose a client to suicide. Remembering that helps. Some. But if I'm being honest, I want each loss to hurt. I believe that the flip side of love is pain. I want death by suicide to bother me. I want the loss of people who had so much to give and share with this world to remain unacceptable to me. That being said, I also want to acknowledge that our lives are not defined by how they end. I say to people that my goal is to eliminate all unnecessary suffering. I know I'll never achieve this goal, but I'd rather show up every day and fail at this than to succeed at doing anything else. No matter how many times I fail, however, I don't get to be a failure unless I begin to believe that this effort itself was unworthy, or I was lacking in effort in its pursuit. I choose to believe that death by suicide is not a failure because those lives were incredibly impactful, even if they were shorter than we would have wished. If those who died by suicide instead had been taken in a car accident or from disease, we may call these losses tragic, but never a failure. I wish I could claim that this belief ends the wrestling match between my mind and heart over my culpability when someone I'm connected to dies by suicide. It doesn't. But I'm hoping this process of laying bare my hypocrisy will make it easier to release. Therapists are expert in emotional challenges, in part because this was our field of study. But for most, it's also because they're continuously navigating their own healing journey. Wisdom is knowledge gained through life experience, and it comes at a terrible cost. I stand before you, a wounded work in progress. I have been marked by suicide, and while those experiences have brought me wisdom, they have taken a toll. Still, I can show up to each new client with an open heart, ready to love and to help them heal. I pray I will never lose another connection to suicide, but if I do, please remind me what I'm saying today. When someone dies by suicide, if they were loved, if they made an impact on this world, there is no way they or any of those who loved them could ever be a failure.